Well, good morning, Shehalem Christian Fellowship. The psalm of the day today is Psalm 24, and Psalm 24 dovetails nicely with yesterday's message, our Sunday message in Revelation chapter 1, that Jesus is the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning, the end, and um, it's all about him being King of glory. And there's a couple things that I want to point out as we get into the psalm this morning briefly that I think set the context really nicely. Number one, that this psalm would be the Sunday psalm of the day. We're doing our psalms of the day, but in temple worship there was a psalm assigned to each day, and so Psalm 24 would be the Sunday, the first day of the week, and so therefore this would be the psalm that was assigned to be sung, whether it be in the home or the temple. I don't know if it was sung in the temple, being that the earthquakes and the veil was torn and all that. But be that as it may, this song would have been at least scheduled for Resurrection Sunday, that center point of that followed the crucifixion. For all history is pointing to the death and the resurrection of Jesus. So this would have been like the Sunday of Sundays, right? And so this would be, in a way, the resurrection psalm of the day. Also, I want you to picture, go as far out or high as you can imagine, out into the second heavens, and you're looking at earth and you're zooming in. Okay, so it starts off, the earth is the Lord's, uh, and so we zoom in to our home here on earth, this temporary home of ours, I guess we could say. And then but there's something special, very special about this place in all of God's creation, for it's the stage that God's salvation plan is displayed. And so, even though this earth might be small in comparison to all creation, it's the centerpiece and the really truly the stage of His wonderful glory and His plan of salvation. So we zoom in on the earth, and the earth is what? It's the Lord's and all its fullness, the world and those who dwell therein. For he has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the waters. So it's just a deed to the earth is deeded to the Lord. And remember, this is the resurrection psalm. And so picture Jesus there in the tomb, lying down dead with the linens the wrappings around him, and then he sits up, comes to life by that supernatural power, the resurrection power of God, and he walks right out of the tomb. And there's this deed to all creation belonging to who? Well, it says in verse 3, who may ascend into the hill of the Lord, or who may stand in his holy place? Very good questions. The first one, the hill of the Lord. What's the hill of the Lord? Well, that's Zion. It's the secular seat of power, and meaning the national seat of power, of world power. And who may ascend to that place of authority, is that's the question it's asking. And then it says, or who may sit in his holy place? Well, where's that holy place? That's the spiritual seat of power. This is the same place that Abraham and Isaac acted out that what was to come, that Calvary moment when um, when the knife was raised by Abraham and he went to go strike, and the angel said, "Hey, stop, don't kill your son." Um, and that dramatic event that happened there on Mount Moriah, meaning the what is to come, God knowing what's to come, and that foreshadowing of the death and the resurrection of Jesus. And what a beautiful moment that was, painting a picture of the death of Jesus and the resurrection, that lamb that was provided on our behalf as they looked over in the ram in the thickets there was provided instead of the death of Isaac, his beloved son. And so you have these two seats of power, one the secular and then one the spiritual seat of power, and all the spiritual promises that Abraham received from that Moriah episode, Zion and Mount Moriah. So who may ascend to those seats of power? The seat of power over all of earth, and the seat of power of all spiritual authority. And then it says, he who has clean hands and a pure heart. Who is that? Is it David? Is it you? Is it me? I don't think so. He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who has not lifted up his soul to an idol, nor sworn deceitfully. Have you ever lied? Have you ever participated in a form of idolatry? Have you ever dirtied your hands with sin? Well, then it's not you. It's not me. I am not worthy of either of those seats of power and authority. Verse 5, he shall receive blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. This is Jacob, the generation of those who seek him, who seek your face. Wait, it's Jacob, the descendants of Abraham? They have clean hands and pure hearts. They've never lifted up their souls to idolatry, nor sworn deceitfully. That's not the case in the Old Testament, is it? As we see over and over again, that frustrating pattern of idolatry, whether it be in the wilderness or even as they go into the promised land, and eventually into captivity. So how can that be said? Well, I think David has just this wonderful grasp of God's grace. This is speaking of the one who is worthy, but it's also pointing to the fact that there's this blessing that's going to be poured out on those who are not worthy. And how does this work? How does this work? Well, I think David had a wonderful grasp of God's grace, that when he was forgiven by God, that it was true forgiveness, and that God would see him as clean, as pure, even as he saw the Son of God, the Son of Man, Jesus Christ, pure. And so it's amazing to me that David had such a grasp on grace, such a grasp on the nature and the character of God, his mercy, his love, his forgiveness, that he would pen something like this. And then it says in verse 7, lift up your heads, O you gates, and be lifted up, you everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? Again, we've asked that question. Who is this? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. So the answer is, it's the Lord. Who is this one that's worthy of all of power and authority on earth and all spiritual authority and power for all time? Well, the Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Jesus won every single battle that was presented before him, whether it be in the wilderness, defeating Satan directly with 3 passages from Deuteronomy, whether it be all the daily temptations that he faced as a man and overcoming by the power of God, whether it be that cross and his voluntary laying down of his life for something he did not do, for those who did do it out of love, whether it be the smallest things, the biggest things, he was mighty in battle. He won every single battle, and he was strong and mighty enough to save all those who would call upon his name. So there you have in verses 7 and 8 this zooming in on the answer to the question, who is this King of glory? It's Jesus. And these gates, these eternal gates that have been shut, closing out all all mankind from God's presence are now opened for the one who is worthy for them to be open to. Maybe there was cobwebs and dust and rust on those gates because they hadn't been ever opened before, but here they're being opened. And then we have this repetition in verses 9 and 10, very similar to verses 7 and 8. It says, again, lift up your heads, O you gates, lift up your everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. Now, I think that, when we're dealing with songs, that's a very common thing to have repetition. You sing the chorus twice. But I think there's more going on here than that. Here you have in verses 7 and 8, Jesus ascending into glory after the resurrection. After all the eyewitnesses seeing him appear here, appear there, testifying, eating fish, right? That he is the resurrected Lord. He ascends into heaven and the gates open for him. And there he is seated at the right hand of the Son of God even now. But then you have this repetition where I believe that verses 9 and 10 are a reference to us experiencing that same opening of the gates, that we get to experience that welcome into the glory of God, just as Jesus did as he ascended into heaven and the disciples saw him go up into the air. And the angel said, hey, why are you staring up in the air? Just as Jesus rose to the right hand of the Son of, or to the right hand of God, we too, the church, all of those who are in faith in Christ, we too will experience that entering in. And that's what we call the rapture. We are raptured, caught up into God's glory, just as Jesus was. And you can't have a king without a kingdom. And the church is his kingdom. We are his people. And so when it says, who is this King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. I believe that's a reference to us, his servants, his people, the church being caught up with him in glory. And what a wonderful resurrection psalm this is. What an appropriate psalm of the day for a Sunday. Even though this is a Monday, we look forward to that resurrection day where we will be made like him and we will see him face to face. What a wonderful hope we have. So keep that on the forefront of your mind today, that you are one of his, soon to be resurrected in power and glory, given a new body that is made to last forever. So we look forward to that day. Be blessed today. No need to fear, no need to worry. God is in control, and he has a wonderful plan for you to be caught up with him in glory. So be